Papagava looking like a snack. That's right, we're back for another Witcher book review. Necklace is on, book is on the floor. Let's go. The Sword of Destiny. The Sword of Destiny is the second book in the Witcher series, written by Andrzej Sapkowski. And yeah, we're basically going to do the same format I did last time, where, you know, I just did them short story by short story. So, with that being said, let's jump into it. Also, book and TV show spoilers, but you already knew that. But the story is this, she'll destroy with a sweet kiss, her sweet kiss, oh. But the story is this, she'll destroy with a sweet kiss. So The Bounds of Reason is basically the short story you see adapted in Season 1 of The Witcher, where Geralt meets Borch 3 Jackdaws with his two bodyguards, Tear and Veer, and he goes and tries to find a dragon. Also, is it just me, but does, like, anyone else trip up on saying Borch 3 Jackdaws' name? Like, sometimes you'll say, like, Borch of 3 Jackdaws, Borch 3 Jackdaws, Borch of the 3 Jackdaws, like... It's a really confusing name. Well, I mean, right off the bat, one of the biggest differences is that Geralt has an orgy with Borch 3 Jackdaws and Tear and Veer, so... kinky. But in all seriousness, the book does expand upon certain elements that the show sort of simplified. For example, the Reavers and the Dwarves play a bit more of a role, and the final bit where they finally meet the Gold Dragon is a bit different. In fact, it's a little bit more confusing, I'd say, because it's like the party finally arrives where the dragon is, and then they sort of have to challenge the dragon. Sir Ike of Dennisley challenges the dragon, and he barely escapes with his life, and that's one thing. In the book, he's much more... you know, serious, and he's actually like an actual knight, where, you know, in the show, he's just an idiot, you know, eats this random monster and then, you know, shits himself to death. And then after Ike fails to tackle the dragon, then the group sort of starts fighting with each other. You know, Geralt and Dandelion disagree about attacking the dragon, but then Yennefer and the Reavers and the Dwarves are sort of just like, nah, we're taking the dragon for ourselves. And then there's a lot of, you know, backstabbing. So Yennefer casts a spell that paralyzes both Geralt and Dandelion, and then she tries to take the dragon for herself, but then she's betrayed by the Reavers, who then tie her up and then are implying that they're going to rape her, but then she's saved by Borch 3 Jackdaws, who is in his gold dragon form. And for the most part, the short story basically ends the way it does in the show, except for, you know, Geralt doesn't, you know, yell at Dandelion and break off from him. Yennefer's told that she can't have children, and, you know, she still wants to have a child, and she'll find her own methods. Geralt and Yennefer also split ways, and their relationship at this point is quite icy. And also, Borch is just a nice little gold dragon who loves being a human, because he enjoys being a human. I will say the bit in the book where Geralt and Yennefer are dangling off the bridge is really tense, and I think it's done a lot better than it is in the show, because in the show it's like the mountain starts collapsing, then Borch like lets go, and then it's kind of like meant to be like a sad moment of like, oh no, Borch and Tear and Veer. But it did come across as a little bit cheesy when, you know, Borch falls into the fog and he just disappears, and then Dandelion's all like, oh no, Tear and Veer, they're so hot and they're gone. And it's funny, but in the book it's just way more tense, and it's just really enjoyable, because at this moment in time, Geralt and Yennefer don't like each other that much. The story basically implies that some time has passed and Geralt and Yennefer have had this on and off relationship, and so when they currently meet, they just don't like each other. And I will say that is my biggest problem with the short story, is that it does feel a little bit out of place. It's just like, oh, Geralt and Yennefer just don't like each other at that point, and I'm like, okay, why? But other than that, I found it to be a very enjoyable story. I will say I do prefer the show version just because it's a tiny bit more simplified, but that's not to say that it's a bad story, I just prefer the one in the show. If this is the path I must trudge, I'll welcome my sentence, I'll give you my penance, garroter, jury and judge. So A Shard of Ice is the story that made me realize that I do not like Yennefer. I think Yennefer is a hoe and belongs to the streets. The story starts off with Geralt and Yennefer, and they're basically an item and they're staying together at this inn. But then as the story progresses and Geralt goes and visits Istrid, who we find out was Yennefer's first true love, we find out that Yennefer is pretty much a hoe. Like, there's this pretty good scene between Geralt and Istrid where they're just having a big dick measuring contest, you know? Geralt's just like, I'm with Yennefer and Yennefer loves me, and Istrid's just like, yeah, but she loved me first. And then Geralt's just like, yeah, but I'm sleeping with Yennefer. And then Istrid's just like, yeah, I fucked her this morning. And I was like, hold up, what? And yeah, it's pretty much at that point where I realized that I don't like Yennefer as a character, like, at all. I find her to be, like, incredibly manipulative, and she's basically just the definition of a temptress. And I will say, I think she comes across as more unlikable in the books because we're not through her perspective, because in the show, she is unlikable, sort of, because, you know, she has those traits, but in the book, because we're not seeing it through her perspective, unlike the show, she just comes across as, you know, what I just said, incredibly manipulative. And yeah, so the story basically wraps up with Geralt and Yennefer talking out their differences. They break up. Geralt is pretty much suicidal, and so he basically goes to this inn looking for a fight. And then he's cornered by this guard called Cicada, who was one of Istrid's men. And a pattern I've noticed that Sapkowski really loves, you know, these sort of characters where they're basically just assholes who want to kill Geralt just because he's a Witcher. And I get it, he's trying to prove the point that people don't like Witchers because they see them as mutant scum and all that, but he's done it a lot now. But yeah, Cicada and his men go try to kill him, but then they sort of chicken out because they're like, oh no, he's a Witcher, he's a mutant freak, So Istrid then challenges Geralt to a duel, and Geralt's all for it, until we actually get to the duel where Geralt's kind of just like, nah, I'm over it, it's fine. And it's just like, no, you're gonna fight me because I love Yennefer, and Geralt's just like, whatever, and leaves. And yeah, as a story, I do like it. I think it is well written. It's just that when I think about this story, it sort of makes me go, yeah, this is the story now that makes me just dislike Yennefer completely. That being said, I do kind of hope that the show goes back and adapts this story because I think it can be done. Geralt in the show hasn't technically met Istrid yet, and I think that it would be a very good way to have conflict between the two of them. But I will say, I don't know if they should do it. I'd like them to do it, but the thing about doing this story and putting it in the show is that, one, you're basically going against the whole Yennefer and Geralt are meant to be together thing, and two, it's also kind of difficult to make this short story work without making Yennefer look like an absolute asshole. So yeah, I'm of two minds about it. I'd love to see it in the show, I just don't know if at this current moment in time in the story it will work. Pam-param, pam-pam-param. Pam-param. So Eternal Flame is a fun short story, but at the end of the day, I do think it's a bit disposable. In a nutshell, it's basically just Geralt and Dandelion run into his friend Desi Biebervelt. They find out that Biebervelt is being impersonated by a Doppler, and then they basically just go and chase the Doppler. And I completely understand why the showrunner and writers of season 1 of The Witcher didn't include it, because at the end of the day, it would have made for a pretty disposable and throwaway episode. That being said, I do think it is a lot of fun, and I think it would make a good side mission in a Witcher video game. I mean, I haven't played the games. For all I know, it is a side mission in those games, but yeah, it's fun. But I completely understand why, from a storytelling perspective, you wouldn't really put this in a TV show. Born of Camoran, born of no love, the song of the white wolf is cold as driven snow. So right off the bat, A Little Sacrifice is my favourite short story in this book. I love this story so much, and I want it to be in season 2, because you can do this in season 2, but I also don't know if they will do it. But yeah, I love this story. To me, it's a really tragic story about unrequited love and being unable to move on from, you know, the love of your life or whatever. I think it's just tragic. I love the character of Essie so much, and it's just heartbreaking at the end of the day. So in a nutshell, Geralt is hired by a duke to basically help play matchmaker with him and a mermaid called Shinaz. So the duke and Shinaz have fallen in love, but they're unwilling to basically cohabitate with each other because one lives underwater and one could gladly live on land but chooses not to. That being Shinaz because, you know, she's a mermaid and she can do that. And I will say, I do enjoy this part of the story, but there's one thing I just kind of want to make apparent, because Sapkowski makes it very apparent, is that he loves talking about Shinaz's boobs and how they're very nice and very shapely. And yeah, that's a thing. It's completely unnecessary, but yeah, it's a thing. But the stuff with the Duke and Shinaz is essentially the B plot of the story, because the A plot of the story is where Geralt meets Essie. So Geralt and Dandelion go to this party and they meet Essie. And Dandelion knows Essie because she's like a very close personal friend to him. And Essie is very interested in Geralt. And Geralt initially is interested in her. And so by the end of the party, Geralt and Essie kiss. And unfortunately for her, it all goes downhill. And for most of the story, Geralt and Essie have a will they won't they relationship, and it all sort of culminates in the scene just after Geralt is injured after he goes to try and sort out the Shinaz situation. And that's where the story just gets heartbreaking, because Essie basically just tells Geralt that she loves him. Like, full on, loves and adores him and would do anything for him, but knows that he doesn't love her back. And the way Sapkowski writes that scene is genuinely just, it's so, like, powerful, because he just has Essie pouring her heart out to Geralt, and we're in Geralt's head, and the whole time he's just like, I know she loves me. In another life, maybe I would have loved her, but I don't. It's just, it really hits. Because one, Geralt is still in love with Yennefer, and Believe me, I have no idea why. And two, he's also putting on the persona of the Witcher, you know, that uncaring, unfeeling human being who can't be capable of love. And just, it becomes really heartbreaking by the end, because Geralt's just like, Essie, you can stay, and I'll hug you, but yeah, that's sort of it. With nothing can happen between us, and just, honestly, I think it's my favorite short story out of all the stories I've read of The Witcher so far, and just, it's really good. I will say that the Duke and Sheenaz subplot does wrap up a little bit too neatly. Like, it's sort of kind of like the conflict is dragged out until the very end, where Sheenaz just walks in human form, her boobs cover this time, but Sapkowski still mentions that her boobs are nicely shaped, walks up to the Duke and is just like, yeah, I'll stay on land with you because, yeah, it's worth a little bit of sacrifice. And it's kind of like, really? Really? I really want this to be in season 2. I don't think it will be, but you can put this in season 2. Like, you know, just how Geralt and Ciri and Jaskier meet up at a party, and then he meets Essie, and then Geralt is contracted by the Duke to help with Sheenaz. Just do it, because it's such a really powerful story. And it still works, because at this moment in time, Geralt still thinks Yennefer is dead, or at least missing. And so his heart would be yearning for Yennefer, and it just makes sense because Essie would then fall in love with him, and he'd just be like, Essie, I don't love you, I love Yennefer. I need this to be in the show. Screw it. I know Lauren H. Histrich, the showrunner, said that they're done with the non-linear storytelling, but please, just put this story in like a prequel episode, because I need it. I need it adapted. As you can see, I really love this story. They came after me with masterful deceit, broke down my lute and they kicked in my teeth. The Sword of Destiny. Yeah, so the Sword of Destiny is the Brokilon stuff you see in season 1, but instead of Ciri and Dara, it's just Geralt running into Ciri in Brokilon Forest. And yeah, it's a nice story. I think Geralt and Ciri have a very nice interaction and good banter. You know, she's sort of trying to be all like sly and cheeky, but Geralt's kind of just like, look, I don't have time for your shit, just like listen to me. And it's quite nice seeing, you know, at first being at odds, then throughout the story they sort of grow a lot closer, even to the point where Ciri kind of like starts cuddling with him for kind of an unnecessary reason, but then as you find out, it's because she's the child surprise and destiny is linking them together. Then there's also the bit where they run into the dryads of Brokilon, and then you find out that some of the dryads in Brokilon aren't naturally born, they're actual girls taken from villages and, you know, being turned into dryads to serve in the Forest of Brokilon. And they basically try to do that to Ciri, except for Ciri is then given a choice because the waters don't affect her, and she's told to either stay or go, and she decides to leave because obviously she wants to be with Geralt and her destiny. And then Geralt and Ciri leave the forest and meet up with Mousak, and Mousak's just like, take her. She wants you because you are tied together by destiny. And Geralt's just like, I don't care about destiny.
I don't want it. I never have.
And that's pretty much where the short story ends, and yeah, it's a nice short story. I keep saying that, but I mean, I don't think I've actually read anything of Sapkowski's that I've disliked. You know, he just has this really rich, like, mythology of the continent, and I just enjoy being in this world. For the song of the white wolf will always sing alone. So in a nutshell, the last short story, Something More, is basically the last episode of season 1 of The Witcher. Geralt saves the merchant Yerga from a bunch of ghouls, he gets bitten, and on his way back to Yerga's farm, Geralt is essentially just having a bunch of fever dreams as he's drinking his elixirs to stay alive. And the way Sapkowski writes it, it's basically just a series of fever dreams from Geralt's perspective. There's one where he meets with Yennefer, and Yennefer's all just like, Geralt, you know we can't be together, and Geralt's just like, I know, but I love you. Then there's one where he meets his mother, Vicenna, and Geralt starts like, you know, venting out all his mummy issues, just like, you left me. Don't say, Geralt, that's not my name. That's not the name you gave me. Vesemir gave me that name. And then there's also the really interesting fever dream where Geralt recounts the time he meets with Calanthe to collect the Child of Surprise that he claimed from Pavetta and Dooney from the first book. And I just love the way Geralt and Calanthe work off each other, you know. They're both very smart characters, and Calanthe is very cunning. She basically forces Geralt to pick between one of 5 children, and that be his Child of Surprise. But the thing that I really love is that Geralt's kind of just like, I only came here just to see what would happen. I kind of just wanted to look Destiny in the eyes and tell it to fuck off. And I think that's just really interesting. Like, you know, it's Geralt just running away from his responsibilities. Then another fever dream was where Geralt basically meets the figure of death on a hilltop, and they just discuss the Battle of Sodden. And throughout the whole thing, Geralt's just like, Yennefer's dead. Yennefer's dead. I know she's dead. I don't want to look at the last name on the list, but Yennefer is dead. And then in real life, he goes to Sodden Hill and finds out that Yennefer isn't dead, and he's sort of just like, oh shit. I thought she was dead. Now, I think this is the last fever dream that Geralt has where he runs into Dandelion just out of the blue. Like, Dandelion just happens to be where Geralt and Yennefer ended up, and it's kind of just like, really? And I'm pretty sure this is a dream, and I like the content of that chapter, but I think as a reader, I just found it to be very out of place. So essentially, Geralt and Yennefer are just out for a horse ride. And I will say, I find it very interesting that Geralt names every single one of his horses Roach, even though they're not the same color. But yeah, Geralt and Yennefer are just, you know, riding along, and they just happen to run into Dandelion. So Geralt and Dandelion just like chill, and they just start talking, and they basically just start talking about the Nilfgaardian War. It's just a big expositional dump about what happened between Cintra and Nilfgaard. It does feel a little bit clunky in the sense of the narrative, where it's kind of just like Geralt and Dandelion just talk about this big war, but I really love what Sapkowski has to say about war. Like, there's this really great speech between Geralt and Dandelion, and I love it. Not in this war, Geralt. After this war, there won't be anybody or anything to return to. Nilfgaard is leaving smouldering embers behind it. The army is marching in a row and dragging everybody out. Scaffolds and stakes stretch for miles along the highways. Smoke is rising along the sky across the entire horizon. You said there hasn't been anything like this since the world has existed? Well, you were right. Since the world has existed. Our world. For it looks as though the Nilfgaardians have come from beyond the mountains to destroy our world. That makes no sense. Who would want to destroy the world? Wars aren't waged to destroy. Wars are waged for two reasons. One is power, and the other is money. Like, I think that is some good writing. Sapkowski just nails basically what war is. And then, yeah, Yennefer tries to offer Geralt the law surprise. Geralt's just like,
I don't want it.
And then just as he arrives home, he basically sees Ciri, and they are reunited. And I will say, it's a little bit more poetic than it is in the show, because in the show it's just simply, who's Yennefer? But in this case, you know, Geralt leaves off with this whole, oh yes, Ciri, you're so dear to me, you're much, much more, or something like that. And that's where the book ends, and I enjoyed it a lot. I think I liked it just as much as The Last Wish, maybe just a tiny bit more because of that Essie story. I will say that the thing I'm enjoying most about the books is the culture of the continent, because it just feels a bit more lived in compared to the show, because with the show it's sort of just like, yep, you go to these towns and you meet the people and they're fun, but you don't really get to experience the overall continent. But with this one, you get to see Geralt just sort of chill, hang around, and just live life. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how the story continues from here, because I have the Blood of Elves just over there, and it's a different style of book, because these were originally just short stories, but now they go into full-on chapters, so I'm interested to see how it all turns out. I'm also very interested to see how the show will adapt Blood of Elves, because Season 2 is supposed to be taking a lot from Blood of Elves, so yeah, I'm excited. But yeah, that's pretty much what I thought of the Sword of Destiny. It'll probably take me, you know, another 7, 8, 9, 10, 12... It'll probably take me ages to get to Blood of Elves, because I don't know why, I just have this thing where I can't read at home, I have to be traveling. So God knows when I'm gonna finish the Blood of Elves. But yeah, that's pretty much all from me. I enjoyed the Sword of Destiny, and hopefully I'll be back for Blood of Elves at some point. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave me a comment down below. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Hit the notification bell down there as well. My social media links are also down in the description, so if you give those a look and a follow, that'd be very much appreciated. I also have a second channel where I make short films, so please be sure to subscribe and take a look at those. And until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.